This is a tutorial on exercise 6, creating a page layout from a blank HTML page. The criteria reads, create a new HTML page in Dreamweaver, save the file to your user/root folder, download the attached files to use in the layout, save the dog photos into your image folder. Have to download these files. I'll go ahead and do it now. And okay, I'll come back to that. Create a new CSS file and attach it to your HTML page. You're going to create a layout based on the below sketch. I'll scroll down there in a minute. You may use a variety of HTML tags and classes to accomplish this. Use the insert div and the below class, container, and the semantic tags to build the layout. Make sure to remove filler text created in the boxes. You will need the following classes and tags to create the structure. Make sure to get the divs that are nested in the right locations. So these are those boxes you're going to create. Then you're going to use lorem ipsum for the filler text in the section. You're going to use these words for the links for the navigation. You're going to stylize the text on the page using tags or classes. Use the body tag for the overall font selection and change the background color. And then refine the other established tags. Then you're going to stylize the links. Make sure that you are including a state for link, visited, and the hover states. Make sure to apply pseudo links to the navigation by using the pound in the link field of the property palette. Create a div class to hold the puppy image. Okay, I named it period photo. Add the text to the footer, daily puppy, copyright 2020. Use the below code to stylize the navigation bar. So you're going to copy and paste this code. Okay, I'm scrolling down. Okay, so you're going to create a container at this width here, 960. You're going to create a header here that is nested inside the container, and you're going to make the height 300. You're going to make the navigation bar a height of 30. You're going to make an aside a width of 200 and a height of 350 pixels. You're going to make a section with a width of 650 pixels, and the height is actually going to be based on the text that's inside. And then you're going to create a footer that has a height of 50. Keep in mind, all these elements are nested in the container here. Eventually, when you're done, it should look very, very close to this. If it varies a little bit, that's fine. Okay, here are the photos that I downloaded from Canvas. So I'm going to open them up. I'm going to copy them, edit, copy 3, close that, and I'm going to put them in my image folder, which is right here, and edit, paste 3 items. Okay. I no longer need this folder, so I am going to move it to my trash. I am going to create a new file in Dreamweaver. So new, document HTML and create. I'm going to save it right away, so I'm going to go File, Save, navigate to my named folder, my root folder, and I'm going to call this EX6, and I'll even call it puppy, and save. The directions also say to create a style sheet and attach it to this file, so I'll do that next. So File, New, this time it's document type of CSS, so I'm going to create. Again, just a blank CSS file. I'm going to save it. File, Save. I'm going to save it in my CSS folder, and I'll just call it Puppy Styles. And save. I'm going to go back to this document. I'm going to attach that style sheet. So I'll do that using my CSS designer. Under sources here, add, attach existing, and I'll navigate to that file I just created. It's in my CSS folder and I called it Puppy Styles. And I'm going to open it and say, okay. All right. Okay, so the directions say, well, based on the wireframe, to create a box with a class name of container at 960 pixels. So let me go ahead and do that. Clicked right here, I'm going to go insert div and I'm going to call it container and say okay. I'll come back and add that width. Now it also says that I need to nest a header, a nav, an aside, and section and footer within that container. So before I put the widths, I'm going to go ahead and add those. Again, it said nested inside, so I'm going to get rid of this filler text here and I'm going to drive the end of that div down. I'll also put some HTML comments here so I can see where the end of it is. So I will apply comment and I'll say end of container. Okay. All right. Container. I'm going to click right in here and I'm going to insert a header. Insert header. And maybe I'll call it main header. And say okay. Now the next thing I need to nest within this container here is a navigation bar. So at the end of the header tag, I'm going to give myself some room and I'm going to insert that navigation bar. So I'm going to go insert navigation and I'll call this main nav and say okay. At the end of the nav tag, I'm going to hit the return key and I'm going to insert an aside. Insert aside, and I'll call this left aside and say okay. At the end of the aside, I'm going to hit the return key and I'm going to add a section. Insert section and I'll call this main section and say okay. After the end of the section tag, I'm going to add a footer. Insert footer and maybe I'll call this main footer and say okay. All right, I'm making sure that everything is nested within that container. I can see the header is, I can see the nav is, the aside is, the section is, and the footer is. Everything's within this main container. Now I'm going to go ahead and set some widths. So I'm going to put my cursor right here. I'm going to open up the CSS designer and I'm going to add a selector for the container. So I'm clicking on add. Okay. The directions say to give it a width of 960 pixels. Okay. Now it says to give the header a height of 300. So I'm going to put my cursor right here. I'm going to add. Okay. It jumped right to the class name I gave the header, which is fine. I'm going to give it a width, actually not a width, I mean a height of 300 pixels. Okay. Now I'm going to do the nav. So I'm going to put my cursor right here and I'm going to click on add selector. Again, it jumped right to the class name, the more specific name. I'm going to give the nav a height of 30 pixels. X. Now I'm going to give the aside, so put my cursor here, add a selector for the aside, a width of 200 pixels. I'm also asking for a height of 350 pixels. Okay. Now I'm asking for the section. I'm going to add the selector for the section. I'm asking for a width of 650 pixels. I'm asking not to put a height because the content that's going to be added will actually create the height automatically. Now I'm asking for the footer to be a height of 50 pixels. So I'm going to add a selector for that. And the height here of 50 pixels. Okay, let's move this out of the way. I've got my main boxes here. Now what I need to do is make this section float next to the aside. So I'll do that in the CSS Designer. I'm going to tell the aside to float to the left. So I'm going to go into the layout properties, scroll down till I find float. Okay. Then I'm going to tell the section to float to the right. Okay. I need to tell the footer to clear the floats. I'm going to come down to the footer and I'm going to say clear both. Now you can give these sections a background color so you can see them more easily. I'll come back to doing that, but at this point at least I have the structure created. Okay, let me go to the style sheet just to make sure that I put the values in correctly. The container 960, that's correct. The header 300 as far as the height. The navigation 30 pixels, that's right. The width of the aside 200, the height 350, it's floating to the left. The main section 650, it's floating to the right, and the footer is 50 for the height, and both these floats have been cleared. All right, now I can move on to some of the styling. Okay, let's take a look at the picture here. Okay, so in the header, I need the text daily puppy, and I'll let you know that this is an H1. I need an H2 here for how to pick the right puppy, and then I've got some filler text here. So let me go ahead and do these couple things first. Let me get the lorem ipsum first. Scrolling up to the link, here's some lorem ipsum, and I'm just going to grab a line, grab this text, and I'm going to go edit, copy. I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to move this out of the way. And instead of having content for class section goes here, I am going to paste my text, but note that it doesn't have the P tag right now. I'll go ahead and change that a little bit later. Maybe I'll hit the return key and do that again. I did get the P tag when I added that text here to both of these, and I'm happy with that for right now. I do need above this text to add another statement, which is, let me go back to Canvas. Down here it says how to pick the right puppy, so I'm going to add that text. I'm going to go ahead and give this the H2, opening up my properties palette, and apply the formatting for the H2. In the top here, this is supposed to say daily puppy, and this is supposed to be a H1, and I'm going to change the text to the daily puppy. Okay. This text right here is going to be an H3. And I'm going to change the text to Puppy of the Day. The footer is supposed to say, what is the footer supposed to say? Daily Puppy Copyright, which is right here. I'm just going to copy and paste that, make it a little bit easier. And I'm going to copy and paste it down here. Paste, and I'll make sure that it is in H3. By the way, it actually just picked up the styling from Canvas, so it made it italic. So I'm going to get rid of that italic. You do have to be careful when you copy and paste between a web page and Dreamweaver. I'm going to get rid of that. Next thing I'm going to do is add that universal selector that zeroes out any kind of default padding. I'm going to do that in my style sheet. You could do this in the CSS designer, but I think it's so short, so it's easy to type. So I'm going to add the asterisk. I'm going to add a curly bracket. Dreamweaver gives me that second curly bracket, and I'm just going to drive that down. And I'm going to put my cursor in between the beginning and end of that curly bracket, and I'm going to type out margin. Okay, I'm going to click right here so I type it right. Gives me the colon. I'm going to do 0 for all sides, and then the semicolon. I'm going to hit the return key. I'm going to type out padding. I get it right here. I'm going to click, and I'm going to do a 0 and semicolon. I click in design view. All the default padding is gone. I'm going to have to add my own. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to center this layout, and I know that's the container tag or selector. So let me open up the CSS designer. I'm going to find the container, which is right here. To center everything, it's margin left and right, and the value here is auto. So it's automatically going to fix both the left and right margin. Okay, let's take a look at the directions and the photo. Okay, I did the filler text. I'm supposed to add these for links. I'm going to come back and do that a little bit later. It does say to add, use the body tag for the overall font selection. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add a selector for the body tag. And I'm going to type out body. Gives it me a code hint right here. I can click on it. And I'm going to change the overall font family to Gill Sans. Now everything is Gill Sans at this point, which is fine. Also, I'm to change the background color to something similar to this. So I'll go to the background, and I will click here, and I'll go into the blues, and I'll pick this one. It doesn't have to be exactly what I had selected in the image. I can see that. Okay, now I'll add a color to the overall container. It's this light blue. So I will go to the container, the background color, and I'll do a lighter blue. Maybe I'll actually make it based on this. So I'm going to start here and then go to a lighter value here and hit the return key. Okay, actually a little bit lighter, I think. There we go. All right, the next thing here, if I'm taking a look, this image is in the background of the header. So I'm going to add it. I'm going to go to the CSS designer, which apparently I closed again. I'm going to go to the header, which is right here. I'm going to go to the background, and I'm going to go to background image, enter URL, path. I'm going to click on the folder icon and look for that image. Make sure that I'm in my image folder, Art116, named folder, images. That image is, oh, the very top one is right here. Okay, there it is. Okay, another thing the directions say to do is make the navigation based on an unordered list. So I'm going to go ahead and type out link 1, hit the return key, link 2, hit the return key, link 3, hit the return key, link 4, and I'm going to make it unordered list. And note that the dots for the unordered list are outside because we zeroed out all the default margins for everything, including unordered lists. I'm also going to make sure that these are links. I'm trying to add that space in here. Okay. I'm going to select this, and in the link section of the property palette, I'm going to put the pound sign for that pseudo link. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Pound for that pseudo link, pound, and pound. Okay, now they're all links, and I'm going to go back to Canvas, and I'm going to copy this code, and I am going to make sure that you get everything, including the periods. I'm going to copy all the way down to the bottom bracket and copy. I'm going to go to my style sheet at the very bottom here, and I'm going to paste, click into design mode, and the formatting has taken place, which is awesome. One thing I do want to note that I did make a change here at the top here, that you do need to give that nav, when you added the nav initially, insert nav, you do need to give it this class name because the styles are calling out the class name. If you don't have that class name, it's not going to work. So initially make sure that you give nav that class name. Let me show you in code. You go to the source code, and here's where I gave the class name. So the styles are associated with this class name. So again, make sure that you have that class name in here. Otherwise, the navigation is not going to appear correctly. Just to reiterate, when you add the initial nav, I'm just going to add another nav here. So my cursor's right here. When you go insert nav, this is where you put that class name. You do not need the period in here. You just need to type out main nav like this. I'm not going to hit the return key, but main nav. Okay, I'm just going to hit cancel. Okay, the next thing I want to tackle in Canvas here is I want to add the white to the text, and I want to center it. And keep in mind that is an H1. So I'm going to go back here, I'm going to select the H1 here. I'm going to create a selector for it. I'm going to add selector, it's down here. I'm going to go to the text properties, and I'm going to change the color to white. I'm going to center it. I'm also going to change the font size. So under font size, pixels, and maybe I'll make it 45. Okay, the next thing I want to do is add the puppy image above this text. So I'm going to do that in code view just to make sure that I'm above it. So right at the beginning of the aside tag, I'm going to hit a return key to give myself some space. And I'm going to go insert image, and I'm going to look for that puppy and puppy 1. And I'm going to open it. There it is. I'm also asking you to do an unordered list. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the return key, and I'm going to type out a list of dog names. So Spot, hit the return key, another dog name, Adeline, hit the return key, Riley, hit the return key, and Charlie. And it is an unordered list, so I am going to go ahead and open up my properties panel and apply the unordered list. Now, since I have zeroed out all the default margins, I'm also going to have to add a selector for that unordered list. I'm going to come back to that unordered list. Next thing I'm going to do is deal with these paragraphs. Again, since I zeroed everything out, none of the paragraphs have any kind of margin or padding added to them. So I am going to add a selector in my CSS designer. I'm just going to put my cursor in a paragraph right here, and I'm going to add the selector. So it's saying, okay, you want to deal with the paragraph that's in the main section in the container. I do. And what I'm going to do, move this out of the way, I am going to add some margin. Okay, they're separating now. Okay, maybe I want to add some line height. So that is in the text properties under line height. Maybe a little bit more. Next thing I'm going to deal with is H2, so it's not right up against the top of this box. So I'm going to add a selector for it. And here it is. I'm going to add the same amount of margin that I added to the paragraphs, which was 13. Okay, force that down. Let me go ahead and preview in the web and save. Okay, good. I do need to deal with the footer, so let me go ahead and tackle the footer. I need to add a selector for that. Move this out of the way. Actually, I have one right here. So container main footer, and I'm going to go to the background properties and do a gray. Okay, I want to center this text here, and I'm noticing it's an H3. And I'm going to add a selector for it. Oops, cancel, add a selector. I am going to go to the text properties and I'm going to center it. I'm also going to force it down a little bit. So I'm going to go to the layout properties and add some margin. I'll do 13 again. Be consistent. Let's go ahead and preview on the web again. Save. All right, it's coming along. I obviously need to deal with this right now. And I also have to add that second image. I want to add a little bit of padding on both sides as well. Okay, I'm going to add that padding. So I'm going to go to the main section here and add some right padding. It's forcing that away from the edge. Let me do 30. Okay, I'm also going to do the aside, but this time I want it to go the other way, so I'm going to add padding on the left of 30. Okay, coming along. I need to still deal with this unordered list because I want it to go over to the right. So I'm going to add a selector for it, which is right here. Left aside unordered list items, and I'm going to add, nope, I don't want that. I want margin, a little bit more. Next thing I want to do is add that other dog image, and I'm going to put my cursor in code view where I want it to be. I want it to be after this first paragraph. So I'm hitting my return key. My cursor's right here. Let me move this out of the way for right now. I'm going to go insert image. I'm going to look for that image, which is right here, and I'm going to open it. It also says in Canvas to wrap a div around it. If you wrap a div, you can actually control it a little bit more. So I've already got that selected here, and I'm going to go insert div. It says in Canvas to name it photo. You don't have to put the period in this dialog box because it's already stating it's going to be a class. And I'm going to say OK. Now this image is 200 by 200. Just to prove it to you in the property palette, it tells me that. And I'm going to also resize that box. So in the CSS designer, I'm going to add a selector for it. Let me see what the whole selector says. Okay. and I'm going to resize it. So I'm in the layout properties and I'm going to do pixels, and I'll do 200 by 200. And now I'm going to float it to the left. So I'm going to scroll down and float to, to the right. And maybe I want to give that box a little bit more room. I'm going to go back and I'm going to adjust the height a little bit. Maybe I'll make them more even. 220 by 220. Okay. Maybe I want to add a little bit of padding at the top here. Move it down, maybe a little bit of padding on the left here. Okay, let's go ahead and preview on the web. Save, and there you go. One thing I haven't done is make a border around this on the side. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to the side. And what I'm going to do is add some margin to make it away from the edge here. Okay, I'm going to go to the border properties all the way around. I am going to do pixels. Maybe I'll do pixels, just something small of 3, a style of solid, and color of maybe something similar to the background color. Hit the return key. Maybe I want to move it down a little bit, and so I'm going to go back to the layout properties and give it a top margin as well. Okay, I think that's about it. Let me go ahead and preview in the web. Okay, I guess I need to get rid of the padding here so it matches a little bit more here. So I will go ahead and do that. So in the CSS Designer, in the left aside, I'm going to drop that out, and maybe I'll increase the margin a little bit more. To center that text, let's see if I've got a selector for that aside. I don't see one for that. So I'll add a selector for that H3 that's in the aside, and I'll give it margin. Center that out a little bit. Let me go ahead and maybe I'll do some on the top as well. Okay, let me go ahead and preview on the web. Save. Take a look at what's here. Maybe I should put a little bit of margin below this H1. Going back. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Again, previewing the web. Let's take a look at this compared to Canvas. So I'm pretty close, but I'm happy with it.